The UFC's bantamweight division is in a very precarious position right now, and the situation has been made much more interesting than ever since former two-division world champion Henry Cejudo started teasing his comeback. Triple C has recently been going after bantamweight division champion Aljamain Sterling for a direct title shot, but the Funkmaster has very different directions he wants his division to take. Let's take a closer look. First off, UFC 280 turned the bantamweight division completely on its head. Many were expecting UFC 280 to be the biggest card of the year, and while the fights themselves didn't disappoint at all, we were more focused on the consequences it had on several weight classes. For now, let's take a look at the 135-pound division in the UFC. The championship was on the line, and the de facto #1 contender match was happening on the same night. Aljamain Sterling was facing off against former champ TJ Dillashaw and put on another clinical performance after Sterling dislocated his shoulder early on in the fight. It was later revealed to be a recurring problem during TJ's training camp, and such injuries take Dillashaw out of competition at the highest level for at least a while. This wasn't the major upset of the night, though. Sterling's been a top dog in that division for years. The real problem was that number 11 Sugar Sean won a decision against number 1 ranked former champion Petr Yan.
Sugar Sean
in what most of the community is calling the robbery of the year. Former champ Khabib was astonished at the decision, claiming he'd given Peter all 3 rounds because of his consistent and prolific takedown attacks in the match. Yan is such a highly touted fighter that many want to see him fight Aljo for the 3rd time, so beating him should guarantee a title shot on paper. Next, does the Sugar Show really deserve a title shot? We have to give O'Malley credit. He did exponentially better against one of the best fighters in the UFC than most people were expecting. True, Sean had been putting on clinical performances since his debut, but this was a gigantic leap in competition, something the Sugar Show had never experienced before. Even so, he was lighting up Yan on the feet with knees up the middle and proved his speed and length to be too much to handle at times. He grits his feet through the entire fight and performed well enough to prove he was worthy of competing against an opponent of Yan's caliber. He may have lost the decision in most people's eyes, even in his own, if you look at the way he reacted when his name was announced, but he proved he was good enough to roll with the big dogs in the division. Not to mention the boost his game would experience after going 3 rounds with a highly ranked opponent. Whether he deserves a shot at the title, though, is a different, more nuanced question that's related to who else is available in the division and the longevity of each individual's winning streak. There are fighters in the division sporting impressive 4 and 5 fight streaks against ranked opponents, and O'Malley only has 1 questionable decision victory over an opponent who may be ranked but also had 2 losses in his last 3 fights. The champion thinks he's proved himself, though, so let's take a look at what the Funkmaster believes. Let's take a look at why Aljo puts O'Malley in front of Cejudo for a title shot. The sport of mixed martial arts evolves faster than any other on the planet, and this is the philosophy behind the champion's belief that Henry Cejudo is not much more than someone who used to fight 3 years ago. To put the weight of that time frame into perspective, the lightweight belt has changed hands and been vacated twice since Khabib's retirement in 2021. Sterling thinks of up-and-coming prospects that are actively competing to be more worthy of a title shot than someone who comes off the bench for the first time in 3 years. He names contenders like Chito Vera as killers that have been dispatching top contenders like O'Malley and Rob Font with just as much finesse as they have been knocking out legends like Frankie Edgar and Dominic Cruz. Disregarding such an impressive 4-fight winning streak reduces the competitive edge in the promotion that makes it the best in the world. Funkmaster further added that he doesn't feel beating Henry Cejudo would add much weight to his legacy, despite many making the case for Cejudo to be the most decorated combat sports athlete of all time. For the current champ, it would just be beating some guy who got off the couch for a paycheck, and the true path to cementing his name into the elite echelon of bantamweights is staying active against established contenders. Things are rarely this simple in the world of promoting championship fights, though, and there may be other forces motivating Sterling's approach. Moving on, why is Triple C suddenly interested in the Funkmaster? Cejudo is pretty famous for mouthing off on Twitter against active champions despite not being on the roster himself, but most of his teasers about returning to the octagon have revolved around taking on featherweight champion and pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, Alexander Volkanovski. Beating the Australian would make Cejudo the only 3-division champion in UFC history, and that feat, combined with his Olympic gold medal in wrestling, would cement him as the greatest fighter of all time. But Volk's decision to go up a weight class in search of his double champ status was catalyzed by newly crowned lightweight champion Makhachev's call-out. They're scheduled to fight next year, which means Cejudo would have to wait another 7 to 8 months for a shot at Volk. We guess Cejudo wants to be active since he officially rejoined the UFC roster back in April, and Sterling's wins over Petr Yan and TJ have made him a worthy scalp to have. On another level, Cejudo made realize just how challenging a fight against the pound-for-pound king would be. Triple C has always been on the smaller side of the smaller weight classes, but Volk used to play rugby at 200+ pounds. The size and power are completely different monsters to deal with, and Cejudo may want to shake off the ring rust before stepping into the octagon against Alex. Additionally, has Cejudo earned a title shot, and does he even need to? Henry is one of those incredibly rare sportsmen that climbed their way to the very pinnacle of their division and then retired at the top. In the world of mixed martial arts, he's the only man to retire as a 2-division world champion who not only won the titles but defended them too. He's left a collection of legends in his wake that includes Mighty Mouse, Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, and more. The last 2 examples above are fighters still in the mix at the top of the bantamweight division, with TJ just having fought for the belt and Dom putting on solid performances against ranked opponents. So why do people feel Cejudo doesn't deserve a shot to win back a championship he never lost? Surely no one would question Khabib's right to challenge for the title if he chose to make a return to lightweight. These are unfortunately the side effects of the persona Cejudo has chosen to adopt for the sake of the camera. The king of cringe is the little man nobody takes seriously because he tells everyone off. We assure you, Cejudo has all the weapons he needs to dispatch Sterling. Finally, what directions could 135 take if Triple C recaptures his belt? When UFC President Dana White was asked after UFC 280 if Yan vs. O'Malley was a #1 contenders match, he refused to give a solid yes because of how unexpected and contested the result was. In turn, he took the time to introduce Cejudo into the conversation himself. That's a solid sign from the UFC brass that it might not matter what Sterling wants to do right now. And if Cejudo does manage to win the belt, 135 is cracked wide open for another intense race for the title regardless of whether Henry vacates the belt or defends it. Yan could challenge for the title again. The circumstances of his recent losses don't do justice to the level of competition Peter brings to the octagon. Corey Sandhagen has been itching for a shot at the title, getting into wars with anyone put in front of him, while no one would question Sterling getting an immediate chance to reclaim his prize. Yet the question remains, where does Cheeto fit into all of this? If this was Bellator, we would surely be headed towards a Grand Prix for the vacant belt, and even though the UFC likes to do things a bit differently, we wouldn't count that option out. The lighter weight classes have never been this interesting in the UFC, the rosters are filling out, and the talent pool is deepening. A Grand Prix for the vacant belt could just be the boost the promotion needs. These are crazy times to be a bantamweight in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, but MMA is nothing if not predictable. Let us know in the comments below who you think should challenge Aljo for the undisputed title next, and who stands the best shot at defeating the increasingly dominant champion at 135 pounds. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe for more MMA content, and we'll see you in the next one.